Here is a number, 105,720. Here is another, 6th Nigel. These two figures came out of the same night, attached to the same player, at the same tournament, on the same court. One of them appeared on every scoreboard in the building. One of them appeared in the WTA prize structure document that nobody in that stadium was reading. The broadcasters opened with the first number because it fit inside a sentence and told a story everyone already understood. Young player eliminated, dominant loss, lopsided margin, better luck next time. The second number is the one that tells you what actually happened at Indian Wells in March 2026. The second number is the one that changes the frame of everything the first number seems to say. And the gap between how those two numbers were covered and what they actually mean together is the story we are building today. Because if you have been watching Alex Eala's career with your full attention, nothing about this week at the BNP Paribas Open was a setback. It was confirmation. It was 56 minutes of tennis framed as a defeat that was, from every angle that matters for the arc of this career, a success. Stick with me through this one, because by the time we have unpacked every layer of what happened during Eala's Indian Wells debut, the prize money structure, the ranking mathematics, the crowd phenomenon that made tournament management rethink its logistics in real time, the press conference quotes that revealed more composure than you have any right to have at 20 years old after a 6-0 second set, and what all of it means heading into the Miami Open, you are going to understand why this week in the California desert was not a stumble. It was a statement. Let's begin with the scoreboard, because that is where everyone else began, and we need to go through it before we can go past it. March 11th, 2026, Indian Wells Tennis Garden, Stadium 1. Alex Eala versus Linda Noskova, 14th seed, Czech Republic, world number 14, a player who hits the ball with the kind of flat, penetrating precision that gives baseliners absolutely nothing to work with. The match lasted 56 minutes. The score read 6-2, 6-0. Every broadcast camera captured the margin. Every headline reflected it. A fourth-round exit. A debut at the 5th Grand Slam that ended in the round of 16 on a scoreline that left no room for ambiguity about which player controlled the match from start to finish. What those headlines did not open with, what most of the mainstream coverage buried in the second half of the story or omitted entirely, was the number that the BNP Paribas Open's prize structure had already written into the ledger the moment Eala's name appeared in the 4th round draw. The WTA prize money structure for Indian Wells 2026 is published and public. Reaching the round of 16, the 4th round, guarantees $105,720. That figure does not adjust based on match duration. It does not shrink because the second set ended in 30 minutes. It does not diminish because Eala's first serve percentage dropped to 57% against one of the tour's most aggressive returners, and the scoreline reflected every percentage point of that deficit. The check for $105,720 was signed the moment she clinched her 4th round placement. What happened in the actual round of 16 match changed the scoreboard. It changed nothing else. Let's be precise about how that money was accumulated, because the structure of Eala's week matters enormously to understanding what those earnings represent. She entered the draw as the number 32 seed. Her seeding secured her a first-round bye. She did not have to play the round of 64. She walked straight into the round of 64 with her first match scheduled in the round of 32 against Diana Yastremska, the Ukrainian veteran who has beaten top 10 players on big occasions and was seeded herself. That match ran for 2 hours and 43 minutes, the longest match of the entire day at Indian Wells, and ended just before midnight with Eala winning 7-5, 4-6, 7-5. It was a professional, hard-fought, physically demanding win against a player who does not give matches away. Then came the round of 32 against Coco Gauff, world number 4, two-time Grand Slam champion, one of the 3 or 4 best players on earth on a given day. Eala was taking her apart, 6-2, 2-0, when Gauff, managing an arm injury serious enough that she told reporters afterward her entire arm had felt like it was on fire, retired from the match. Eala collected the win and advanced to the 4th round. The $105,720 was locked in before she hit a single ball against Noskova. That is not a minor detail. That is the architecture of professional tennis prize structures working exactly as intended. You earn money by advancing through rounds. The match against Noskova was, from a financial standpoint, already a bonus before it started. And from a ranking standpoint, the 120 points Eala collected for reaching the round of 16 were equally secured before the Noskova match began. Those 120 points combined with the minimal points she was defending from the corresponding period last year, because Indian Wells 2025 had been before her breakthrough, meaning she had almost nothing to defend here, pushed her ranking to a career high of number 28 in the world when the WTA updated its list the following Monday. Number 28 in the world, at 20 years old, in her first ever appearance at Indian Wells. Let's talk about how Eala processed the Noskova loss publicly, because what she did in the mixed zone after that match is one of the most revealing data points of her entire professional career. Players who lose 6-2, 6-0 in 56 minutes on the main stadium court of a WTA 1000 event in front of a packed house, especially players who are 20 years old and dealing with the weight of a debut at a prestigious tournament, tend to fall into one of two modes in the press conference. They either disappear into corporate language about processes and learning experiences and working hard in practice, or they become visibly emotional in ways they cannot fully control. Both responses are understandable. Both responses are human. Neither response is what Eala gave. She stepped in front of the cameras and said this: "Tough match. I think she played super well. I don't think I was able to find my groove, and nothing clicked for me in today's match." Then she was asked how she felt about her week as a whole, and she said, "I'm in the 4th round of Indian Wells. I'm really happy about that. It's still something I'm really proud of. I wish it could end on different circumstances, but it is what it is, and there will be a next time for sure." And then, this is the line that landed differently than all the rest. She added, "I think my experiences here and my matches here have really meant a lot for me. It's a learning experience for me. I wouldn't consider today's match a positive experience for me, but down the line, I believe it will have a positive impact on my progression as a player." Read that sequence carefully. She is not performing composure. She is not reciting talking points about growth and process because someone told her to say those things. She is giving you an accurate assessment of what happened. She did not find her groove, nothing clicked, and simultaneously holding the full picture of the week without letting the last 56 minutes collapse everything that came before them. She is doing in the press room exactly what Maria Sharapova said she does on the court, finding the sweet spot between treating victories too high and treating tough moments as the defining event of your existence. The 6-0 second set was real. The $105,720 was also real. The career high ranking was real. The packed stadium one behind her for all of it was also real. A player who can hold all of those things simultaneously and give you an honest, grounded account of the week within 90 minutes of a lopsided defeat is operating with the mental clarity of someone who has done the internal work. And then she posted on Instagram the same afternoon, before the evening was over. She wrote, "Finally found my way to paradise. Thank you, Indian Wells. See you next year." That is not a recovery arc. That is not a carefully drafted overnight response after sleeping on the loss. That is a calendar commitment made before the court lights went down. She lost. She assessed the week correctly. She made a plan to come back. That is the full emotional processing cycle, completed in a single afternoon, posted publicly before most people had even read the score. For a 20-year-old after a 6-0 loss at her debut in the 5th Grand Slam on the main stadium court. That is remarkable. Now let's talk about what was actually happening in that stadium all week, because the Noskova scoreline tells you absolutely nothing about what Indian Wells looked like during Eala's presence there. And the contrast between those two pictures is where the real story of this tournament lives. Before she had played a single competitive match in the California desert, something unusual was happening on the practice courts. Eala's warm-up sessions, not competitive sets, not main draw matches, just a young player hitting forehands in preparation, were drawing crowds. Not modest, polite, a few dozen people watching crowds, substantial crowds, Organized, Filipino flag-waving, coordinated crowds that assembled at whatever court she was scheduled on and filled the available space before she had even struck the first practice ball. Tournament staff had to recalibrate positioning logistics. Adjacent courts with scheduled main draw matches played out to scattered applause while hundreds gathered to watch a 20-year-old prepare for her debut. That is a documented phenomenon at Indian Wells 2026. Not an exaggeration, not a tabloid embellishment, but a logistical fact that the tournament had to manage in real time. Then the competitive matches started. Her opening round match against Yastremska was scheduled in Stadium 3, the third largest venue at Indian Wells. What happened was exactly what anyone who had watched the practice sessions already knew would happen. The stadium filled. Lines formed outside for fans who could not find space inside. The match ran past midnight in temperatures that dropped sharply in the desert, and fans wrapped in blankets refused to leave regardless of the hour or the cold. The Laban Alex chants, Tagalog for Fight Alex, bounced off the stadium walls for 2 hours and 43 minutes. When the match ended, Eala looked up at a stadium that had been completely absorbed in her world for the better part of 3 hours on a Tuesday night in the Southern California desert. Then came the golf match. The tournament had the sense to schedule that one on Stadium 1, the 16,000-seat main arena, and the Filipino contingent filled the upper bowl at one end while the rest of the building filled in around them. The noise in that building when Eala hit winners was, by multiple documented accounts, unlike anything those specific seats had produced for a player of her ranking in living memory. The crowd was not just loud, it was directional. It came from specific organized sections with flags and coordinated chants, and the energy of a community that had traveled from across the state and across the country, and for some from across the Pacific, just to be in that building for that match. When Goff retired at 6-2 to Eala, the response in the stadium was enormous, an outpouring of relief and joy and pride that the broadcast microphones captured in full. And then came March 11th, the Noskova match, the round of 16, Stadium 1 again, and despite what the scoreboard eventually showed, the upper bowl of Stadium 1 was full of Filipino flags before the first serve. The fans who had traveled to Indian Wells had not come for the round of 16 result. They had come for the player, and they stayed for every ball, through the 6-2 first set and the 6-0 second set, and the 56-minute duration that produced the worst scoreline of Eala's Indian Wells week, until the match was over and the lights began to go down. Stand in Linda Noskova's position for a moment and think about what that environment is like to play in. You are the 14th seed. You are technically dominant. You execute one of the best performances of your Indian Wells 2026 campaign, a masterclass in flat, aggressive, hardcourt tennis that gives your opponent no rhythm and no angles to work with. You win 6-2, 6-0 in 56 minutes. You close it cleanly, with authority, as a seed of your ranking is expected to do. You advance to the quarterfinal, and the entire time the stadium is organized and waving flags and chanting for someone else, not for you, for the player you are beating. Noskova won that match on the scoreboard with complete authority. The stadium's geometry on that night was constructed around a different name. This is the dimension of the Eala story that the standard sports coverage apparatus does not have a good framework for describing, because it does not fit neatly into any existing category. She did not win the match. She did not advance. She lost 6-0 in the second set. And yet the tournament's most watched court was hers. The crowds that created logistical challenges for the staff were hers. The social media engagement, the broadcast energy, the images that circulated across every tennis account for days after the event, those were generated by her presence and her absence equally. When she was there, the building had a different quality. When she was gone, as the Stadium 2 controversy in the later rounds of the tournament made viscerally clear, that quality went with her. Aryna Sabalenka did what she was expected to do at Indian Wells. The world number 1 walked out, eliminated Naomi Osaka 6-2, 6-4, handled every opponent she faced with the kind of dominant precision that explains why she holds that ranking, and reached the quarterfinal with her world number 1 status entirely unchallenged. Nothing about Sabalenka's week was anything other than what a defending champion at the top of the women's game is supposed to produce. But the ticketing environment at this tournament was not written for Sabalenka. It was not written for any player whose crowd arrives by virtue of reputation and seeding, rather than by the kind of devotion that overruns practice courts before the competitive schedule has even started. The difference between what happened in Sabalenka's section of the draw and what happened wherever Eala was scheduled is not a commentary on Sabalenka's tennis. It is a commentary on a specific and extraordinary phenomenon that has attached itself to a 20-year-old from Quezon City and follows her across continents. The Eala effect on attendance is now a documented competitive talking point at the highest levels of tournament management. Tommy Haas, the tournament director of Indian Wells, former world number 2, a man who has presided over this event during the height of the Federer-Nadal era, sat down with Tennis Channel during the second week and said publicly that he had never seen anything like the commitment of the Filipino fan base. He pointed to what Eala and Brazilian star João Fonseca represented for the tournament's atmosphere and for the sport, and he drew a direct contrast between what they bring and the reality that the previous generation's legends cannot be replicated. He said with complete candor that the sport needs common sense about recognizing and elevating the players who generate this kind of response. That from a man who has scheduled Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal on these same courts. That context matters. And when both Eala and Fonseca had been eliminated, what followed at Indian Wells confirmed every word of what Haas had said. The Stadium 2 policy change, converting the second largest venue to fully reserved seating, locking out the grounds pass crowd that had historically created organic atmosphere in the evening sessions, produced exactly the visual disaster that critics of the policy had predicted. Matches on Stadium 2 featuring legitimate, highly ranked professional players unfolded before scattered audiences. Empty sections in a premium venue during a WTA 1000 event became the image that tennis journalists and fans could not stop circulating. The Athletic and multiple tennis beat reporters documented the contrast directly. The electricity when Eala was on the grounds, the deflation when she was gone, and the structural failure of a ticketing policy that had removed the organic fan flow that used to compensate for exactly that kind of energy drop. The tournament released a statement after the event saying it would carefully evaluate the Stadium 2 policy going forward. That is a polite way of saying the experiment did not work, and the empty seats told the story more clearly than any internal review ever could. What the entire Indian Wells 2026 experience revealed, not suggested, not implied, but revealed with the directness of packed stadiums and empty ones in direct sequence, is that the era of the WTA Tour, in which star power derives automatically from ranking, is over, or at minimum significantly complicated. Ranking matters, seeding matters, the top of the draw matters, but the player who fills a 16,000-seat stadium on a Tuesday night in the fourth round of their debut at a tournament, the player whose practice sessions require logistical management, the player whose presence or absence determines whether Stadium 1 has the energy of a premier sporting event or a dressed-up practice session, that player's value is not fully captured by any number on the WTA rankings page. It lives in the rooms. It lives in who fills them.